So I'm Andy Brooks. I'm a recent PhD graduate at the University of California, Berkeley. And what you're going to see is some of the findings that kind of came out of my dissertation research there. I'm not going to take you through my dissertation, but this is one little nugget that I got to talk about in the conclusion that didn't get to pursue a whole lot, and I've been working on that since then. What I'm looking at is user empowerment as business strategy. So what is the intersection between GDPR and the fitness wearables space? And what I mean by fitness wearables is these things that you see today. So anywhere from as simple as, a Fitbit One, which I have in my pocket, I've had one for years, to wrist trackers, to the Finland-based Suunto Ultra, to the Apple Watch, to the Garmin on my wrist, and then even, your iPhone can track your physical movements, things like that. This is a huge space, right? And there's many different definitions of what a fitness wearable is. And the way I think about it is anything that you basically have on your body at some point that tracks something that can relate to your fitness. Say, like mine, my heart rate monitor, I don't have my heart rate strap on right now, but it can measure my heart rate, it can measure my heart rate interval, so the time between heartbeats, which is a very different thing. You can do different things with that. To your location, to be able to track how far you've walked, your physical gait and steps, things like that. So Kai's going to queue up a couple of Screen.io questions just to kind of gather people's, or so we can get an idea of, who have used a fitness wearable before. So as simple as, I've never used a fitness wearable, to, I've used one but no longer use one, or I currently use a fitness wearable. Now, take a broad view of what a fitness wearable is. We'll do that. That's much higher than I thought. Wow. All right, let's go to 40. Come on, you guys can do it. Who hasn't done it? Oh, I'm probably logged in. I haven't done it. So I'm down here for 11. All right, that's good. Kai, can you go to the next one? This is a lot different than what I thought. So, okay, for those who have for those who no longer use it, so no cheating, right? So like if you no longer use a fitness wearable, why not? Can you just kind of explain why you don't do it? And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about here, about proposal for this. Okay, so let's just roll that. Can that just run in the background? Okay. This one. Okay. So there's a number of challenges in the fitness wearable space. So this is something I've studied for a number of years, and it started in fitness wearable space in the sense that you put something on, tracks your data, you can look at it online, you can share it, right? It goes from the early 2000s. Suunto was one of the first companies, based here in Finland, who did this. They I don't know if they came up with the idea. It's one of those Darwin things. There's probably a lot of people working on it, but they were one of the early ones, right? At that time, they were really working with early adopters, so like leading edge users doing this. Well now, if you follow like Geoffrey Moore adoption curves, we're kind of like in the early majority phase, right? A lot of people around the world have adopted these things, at least in developed countries. There's a lot of growing competition, particularly in the lower price segment, right? So you had the original higher end watches for triathletes and things like that, but now you can just go buy one of these for $20 or $30, something like that. There's a risk of platform envelopment by Google and Apple. So if you're familiar with platform envelopment, it's this idea that you have this fitness device, you can wear it, it's collecting your data, but then all of a sudden your phone can do the same thing. So why do you need to use a Fitbit when you just have your phone, right? So that's a risk. There's also experience a really high user churn rate in the wearable space. So people pick them up, they use it, and they drop it, and it lives in a box. This comes from my interactions with people at all these companies who do this, and they're like, all of a sudden we have these people who use these devices and then they stop. And we don't know why, because we can't really communicate with them when they're not wearing it, right? It's a challenge, right? And there's the big user abandonment part. And recently there's been this development that the results are mixed on whether it actually improves your fitness level, which is kind of scary and shattering for the entire industry. And part of what that is because a number of them, most of them, don't go for medical grade compliance, medical device compliance in the United States, because that opens them up to a number of regulatory issues. So they're kind of playing, I would say, fast and loose, that's my politics on that, with regard to how this can actually improve your fitness. So there's a lot of challenges here, and my interest in this space is that's a big problem. Like if we don't really figure out how to create good personal data ecosystems that create value for people, they can't get fitter. Right, which is kind of something that I would say most of us want people to do, is society should be fitter in different ways. GDPR, I think, presents a really interesting opportunity for particularly the wearable space. Right, so I won't go into the list of all the details of how it will change. But there's this change with affirmative assent to data processing, so much more explicit, clear, concise, like, yes, you can process my data. The big one I think is key is that you're processing biometric and health data, and what is biometric and what is health data kind of gets a little kludgy. Individuals and users can withdraw from having their data processed, right? And what does that mean for a fitness wearables company? There's also the right to be forgotten, right? So don't track my data anymore and then delete all my data. Like, what do we do about that? It's a big concern for these companies. But then also this one of right to data portability. And I'm going to riff on this one a little bit with what I propose, and hopefully we can chat about, is an idea for what might address some of the industry challenges in this space. The proposal I have is, how can fitness wearable companies address these challenges that we see while complying with GDPR? And the one I really want to focus on is that user abandonment part. What can we do to empower users with better information such that they continue to use their devices? I forget what were some of the results here, right? A bit boring after a few weeks, too many devices, battery charging, okay. What I found in this space, generally what people come after a few months is the information isn't really valuable to me anymore. It's not really useful. Like 10,000 steps, where did that come from? That's not personalized, that doesn't make any sort of sense. Where you don't see abandonment is in the really high-end devices, like with triathletes and things like that, because it's tracking their heart rate, and you can improve and lower your resting heart rate and things like that. So the idea is like, how do you improve what it is for the lower end of the market, the basics, with what we're learning from the higher end? Strategy, the proposal that I have is, there's one of many that you could do here, but could you empower users by opening the access aspect of personal data ecosystems? And by what I mean there, we're open, I wear big air quotes here, is with regard to transparency, accessibility, which is like the technical part, and then the interoperability and portability part, which I know I shouldn't put a slash between the two because they're very different, we can go into that. But this is what the strategy I propose. So I kind of help situate what I mean by these ecosystems. Here's a very rudimentary, basic diagram of what I consider an ecosystem for a personal data device, right? So there's me, Andy, I've got my Garmin Fenix 2 watch, which collects my heart rate. It then goes on my watch into Garmin servers to analyze it, and then it's distributed back to me, at least. There's a feedback loop here, on my watch, so it can tell me how fast I'm running, or my heart rate, or my training effect, things like that. But then also, what I can do is choose to distribute that data to, say, the public. I can post my information online, right, and just share that. Or, like I did with a run this morning, is I can share that with other users. I can share that with other users on other services, like Strava is where I post my data. So Garmin Connect has all my data, but then I also post it to these other places. And what I propose in this is looking at how we can open up this analysis aspect, because these other parts are kind of open in various sorts of ways. With regard to collecting, there's a number of standards. There's, the ANT Plus standard, and there's Bluetooth to collect data for these things. Then there's all sorts of kind of emerging standards about how to distribute data, or just make it available in a CSV file, so you can do whatever you want. The one that isn't open yet and no one's doing anything about is this analysis part, where that's really where the value comes out of, like, how do I improve my fitness? How do I get better? Is that analysis aspect. So that's what I propose digging into. 3 different ways I see to do that. One is just simple transparency. How is the data analyzed, right? What are the elements, literally, of the algorithms that you use to calculate calories? Does anyone know how many different ways there are to calculate calories? Dozens, and everybody compares them, and it doesn't make any sense. Accessibility. Can you allow users to select and or modify the algorithm itself? I'm not saying every user would do this. You can figure out some way to do it, right? Do you also offer like some sort of app-based model where third parties can analyze data, right? So it's like I can choose to not have Garmin do it, but I have Strava analyze my steps. Maybe it's better, maybe it's worse. I don't know, really, because there's no transparency about how that works, but maybe that's a model. The goal here is competition, right? So can you create a competitive market with analysis to be able to get better information to provide back to users? The last proposal is with regard to interoperability and portability. So can you provide, say, analysis APIs that then would be publicly available? That's the technical part, right? So could Strava or Garmin or Suunto make available, here is their API on how to analyze calories. Companies already do this. There's another Finnish company called Firstbeat who came up with some of the early analytics in doing this, and they provide private APIs to Strava and Garmin and others, and they license these sorts of things. But could they make them public? What would that cost? That's a money problem. We can solve that, right? What I also dream too is there this way that users and companies could configure their own, what I call MyFitnessData ecosystems? And I propose this kind of like open analysis future, right? So imagine a world where a user configures their own, wearable, right? And this is not really how it would work, but you got to think big blue sky, right? So it's like what data is collected, how it's collected, by whom. The key one here, how that data is analyzed and by whom, and what information is returned and how. So here's a simple one, right? Like, so say Sydney wants to improve her fitness. She allows her Apple Watch to track her steps. Rather than having Apple track her steps, analyze the data, she chooses this company, say MySteps, right? To analyze her data, which recommends the number of steps she should take tomorrow. So it's personalized, that's the analysis part. A route in her neighborhood, analysis, that's personalized as well. And then, if you know the forecast for tomorrow in Helsinki, it's probably gonna rain, right? So like, she should bring an umbrella when she goes on her walk. That addresses a major challenge that fitness wearable companies have right now, where that leads to the abandonment. In my interviews with these folks, they'll be like, oh, I dropped the thing because I didn't know that it was gonna rain tomorrow, so I didn't achieve my goal, and then I got a sad face, and then I was not motivated to keep using it, right? So like, this is all analysis aspects. So that's just one scenario you could play with. And then towards that future, right? So how can we move forward in this space? One is, can we continue to analyze what are some of these ecosystem wearables? How are they open? Why? How do we define that? Is it a technical thing? Is it a transparency thing? Catalog the various public fitness data algorithms, right? Because they're out there. Like the medical space is doing a lot of research on analyzing personal data and publishing it and making it available. It's not all locked up under intellectual property by companies like Firstbeat, not to paint them as being bad, right? And then could one actually create some sort of open, MyData-based wearable fitness experience and put it out there in the world and see what happens? And maybe we can motivate companies to do more. Cool. Thanks.